Keys to warfare. Quite often, we feel somewhat lost in our actions. We could do this or that. We have many options, but none of them seem quite necessary. Our freedom is a burden. What do we do today? Where do we go? Our daily patterns and routines help us to avoid feeling directionless, but there is always the niggling thought that we could accomplish so much more. We waste so much time. Upon occasion, all of us have felt a sense of urgency. Most often, it is imposed from outside. We fall behind in our work. We inadvertently take on more than we can handle. Responsibility for something is thrust into our hands. Now, everything changes. No more freedom. We have to do this. We have to fix that. The surprise is always how much more spirited and more alive this makes us feel. Now, everything we do seems necessary. But eventually, we go back to our normal patterns. And when that sense of urgency goes, we really do not know how to get it back. Leaders of armies have thought about this subject since armies existed. How can soldiers be motivated, be made more aggressive, more desperate? Some generals have relied on fiery oratory, and those particularly good at it have had some success. But over 2,000 years ago, the Chinese strategist Sun Tzu came to believe that listening to speeches, no matter how rousing, was too passive an experience to have an enduring effect. Instead, Sun Tzu talked of a death ground, a place where an army is backed up against some geographical feature, like a mountain, a river, or a forest, and has no escape route. Without a way to retreat, Sun Tzu argued, an army fights with double or triple the spirit it would have on open terrain, because death is viscerally present. Sun Tzu advocated deliberately stationing soldiers on death ground to give them the desperate edge that makes men fight like the devil. That is what Cortés did in Mexico, and it is the only sure way to create a real fire in the belly. The world is ruled by necessity. People change their behavior only if they have to. They will feel urgency only if their lives depend on it. Taking advantage of the opportunity, they began to question Han Xin. According to The Art of War, when one fights, he should keep the hills to his right or rear, and bodies of water in front of him or to the left, they said. Yet today you ordered us on the contrary to draw up ranks with our backs to the river, saying, we shall defeat Chao and feast together. We were opposed to the idea, and yet it has ended in victory. What sort of strategy is this? This is in the art of war too, replied Han Xin. It is just that you have failed to notice it. Does it not say, in the art of war, drive them into a fatal position and they will come out alive, place them in a hopeless spot and they will survive? Moreover, I did not have at my disposal troops that I had trained and let from pastimes, but was forced, as the saying goes, to round up men from the marketplace and use them to fight with. Under such circumstances, if I had not placed them in a desperate situation where each man was obliged to fight for his own life, but had allowed them to remain in a safe place, they would have all run away. Then what good would they have been to me? Indeed, his generals exclaimed in admiration, we would never have thought of that. Records of the historian, Sima Qian, circa 145 BC, circa 86 BC. Death ground is a psychological phenomenon that goes well beyond the battlefield. It is any set of circumstances in which you feel enclosed and without options. There is very real pressure at your back, and you cannot retreat. Time is running out. Failure, a form of psychic death, is staring you in the face. You must act or suffer the consequences. Understand, we are creatures who are intimately tied to our environment. We respond viscerally to our circumstances and to the people around us. If our situation is easy and relaxed, if people are friendly and warm, our natural tension unwinds. We may even grow bored and tired. Our environment is failing to challenge us, although we may not realize it. But put yourself in a high-stakes situation, a psychological death ground, and the dynamic changes. Your body responds to danger with a surge of energy. Your mind focuses. Urgency is forced on you. You are compelled to waste no more time. The trick is to use this effect deliberately from time to time, to practice it on yourself as a kind of wake-up call. The following 5 actions are designed to put you on a psychological death ground. Reading and thinking about them won't work. You must put them into effect. They are forms of pressure to apply to yourself. Depending on whether you want a low-intensity jolt for regular use or a real shock, you can turn the level up or down. The scale is up to you. Stake everything on a single throw. In 1937, the 28-year-old Lyndon B. Johnson, at the time the Texas director of the National Youth Administration, faced a dilemma. The Texas Congressman James Buchanan had suddenly died. Since loyal Texan voters tended to return incumbents to office, a Texan congressional seat generally came available only every 10 or 20 years, and Johnson wanted to be in Congress by the time he was 30. He did not have 10 years to wait. But he was very young and was virtually unknown in Buchanan's old district, the 10th. He would be facing political heavyweights whom voters would heavily favor. Why try something that seemed doomed to failure? Not only would the race be a waste of money, but the humiliation if Johnson lost badly could derail his long-term ambitions. Unlimited possibilities are not suited to man. If they existed, his life would only dissolve in the boundless. To become strong, a man's life needs the limitations ordained by duty and voluntarily accepted. The individual attains significance as a free spirit only by surrounding himself with these limitations and by determining for himself what his duty is. The I Ching, China, circa 8th century BC. Johnson considered all this, then decided to run. Over the next few weeks, he campaigned intensely, visiting the district's every backwater village and town, shaking the poorest farmer's hand, sitting in drugstores to meet people who had never come close to talking to a candidate before. He pulled every trick in the book, old-style rallies and barbecues, newfangled radio ads. He worked night and day, and hard. By the time the race was over, Johnson was in a hospital being treated for exhaustion and appendicitis. But in one of the great upsets in American political history, he had won. By staking his future on one throw, Johnson put himself in a death-ground situation. His body and spirit responded with the energy he needed. Often we try too many things at one time, thinking that one of them will bring us success. But in these situations, our minds are diffused, our efforts half-hearted. It is better to take on one daunting challenge, even one that others think foolish. Our future is at stake. We cannot afford to lose, so we don't. Act before you are ready. In 49 BC, a group of Roman senators, allied with Pompey and fearing the growing power of Julius Caesar, ordered the great general to disband his army or be considered a traitor to the Republic. When Caesar received this decree, he was in southern Gaul, modern-day France, with only 5,000 men. The rest of his legions were far to the north, where he had been campaigning. He had no intention of obeying the decree. That would have been suicide, but it would be weeks before the bulk of his army could join him. Unwilling to wait, Caesar told his captains, "Let the die be cast." And he and his 5,000 men crossed the Rubicon, the river marking the border between Gaul and Italy. Leading troops onto Italian soil meant war with Rome. Now there was no turning back. It was fight or die. Caesar was compelled to concentrate his forces, to not waste a single man, to act with speed and to be as creative as possible. He marched on Rome. By seizing the initiative, he frightened the senators, forcing Pompey to flee. Death is nothing, but to live defeated is to die every day. Napoleon Bonaparte, 1769 to 1821. When danger is greatest, it is rare to break one's leg when in the course of life one is toiling upwards. It happens much more often when one starts to take things easy and to choose the easy paths. Friedrich Nietzsche, 1844 to 1900. We often wait too long to act, particularly when we face no outside pressure. It is sometimes better to act before you think you are ready, to force the issue and cross the Rubicon. Not only will you take your opponents by surprise, you will also have to make the most of your resources. You have committed yourself and cannot turn back. Under pressure, your creativity will flourish. Do this often, and you will develop your ability to think and act fast. Enter new waters. The Hollywood studio MGM had been good to Joan Crawford. It had discovered her, made her a star, crafted her image. By the early 1940s, though, Crawford had had enough. It was all too comfortable. MGM kept casting her in the same kinds of roles, none of them a challenge. So in 1943, Crawford did the unthinkable and asked out of her contract. Be absolute for death. Either death or life shall thereby be the sweeter. Reason thus with life. If I do lose thee, I lose a thing that none but fools would keep. A breath thou art, servile to all the skyey influences that dost this habituation where thou keepest hourly afflict. Merely thou art death's fool. For him thou laborest by thy flight to shun, and yet runnest toward him still. Thou art not noble, for all the accommodations that thou bearest are nursed by baseness. Thou'rt by no means valiant, for thou dost fear the soft and tender fork of a poor worm. Thy best of rest is sleep, and that thou oft provokest. Yet grossly fearest thy death, which is no more. Measure for Measure, William Shakespeare, 1564 to 1616. The consequences for Crawford could have been terrible. To challenge the studio system was considered highly unwise. Indeed, when she then signed up with Warner Brothers, predictably enough, she was offered the same mediocre sorts of scripts. She turned them down. On the verge of being fired, she finally found the part she had been looking for, the title role in Mildred Pierce, which, however, she was not offered. Setting to work on the director, Michael Curtis, she managed to change his mind and land the role. She gave the performance of her life, won her only Best Actress Oscar, and resurrected her career. In leaving MGM, Crawford was taking a big chance. If she failed to succeed at Warner Brothers, and quickly, her career would be over. But Crawford thrived on risk. When she was challenged, when she felt on edge, she burst with energy and was at her best. Like Crawford, you sometimes have to force yourself onto death ground, leaving stale relationships and comfortable situations behind, cutting your ties to the past. If you give yourself no way out, you will have to make your new endeavor work. Leaving the past for unknown terrain is like a death, and feeling this finality will snap you back to life.